Ayo, welcome back. Zen Puck here. Another day feeling free as a bird. Today, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite subjects and also kind of a fundamental basis of what this channel is all about, right? Which is the question what it means to be rich enough. Okay? I'm going to break this into two parts. One is why this question is important to answer, and then I'll move on to what it means to me specifically, right? The first part is why is it important, right? Well, it's pretty simple, right? When people think about what it means to be rich, they usually have like a celebrity in mind, right? Like, or the old show, if you're old enough to remember, like MTV Cribs, right? These are celebrities' houses. They're usually really pimped out. And today's version would be, you could see like Drake's house in, I think, Toronto or something that's like $100 million. These are all signs of obvious wealth, right? Houses or a yacht or private planes, right? Those are fine things to aspire to, right? But I don't think they are very relevant to everyday people like you and I, right? Even though I count myself as rich enough, my definition of that just don't include those things, okay? So the reason why being able to define this individually is important is because if you don't know that, then you get into this never-ending cycle of wanting the next thing and the next thing, right? I'll give you a really quick example, right? My wife says, hey, like if you want me to kind of get on the fire train with you and not have a real job, she said, well, I would like to be able to travel business class to places. That's a relatively reasonable request considering that, for her work, she's had to travel a lot and she's built up status with airlines, so she's kind of used to, traveling business class, right? But I still caution her against this ask because I'm like, look, it's just one step away from like, well, first you're in business class, then why not first class where available? Then why even be on commercial flights? Why not just be, a part owner of a private jet kind of thing that, that kind of stuff exists for like rich people. And then if you're really rich, why not just have your own plane, right? Have a staff and a hangar nearby on deck. And if you really have the time as well, why not start flying your own planes? Yeah, there's, again, you see how this keeps going and going and going, right? And I could even go even further, right? If you're already flying your own planes and traveling, why not go into space on your own, right? Leave the atmosphere. Like, there's no end. Like, Bezos, like, basically spending his fun money on space projects. This is what people do, right? So if you don't define what is an end goal, there's no end to how much money we could blow for any field of life, okay? Any aspect of life, you could go crazy with it, right? And reach some ridiculous level of spending, right? My other example was just Drake's house, right? His net worth apparently was around 300 million, and he spent a third of it on a house in Toronto. It's not like a major metropolitan area of the world. Toronto wouldn't crack top 5, okay? I'm sure it's a nice place. I've never been. I'm sure it's a lovely place. I'm just saying, why would you spend so much money in a city that no one would want to visit you in, right? Like, I'm sure his celebrity friends would all come together with him in New York or LA or London or Paris. But Toronto, like, who cares? Like, you got a great house. Who's going to visit you there? I mean, if you had $100 million house, I hope you get a lot of utility out of it, right? Like, I hope you're showing it off, not just, be like, oh, cool, I can be in a magazine for 1 month out of 1 year, and that's it, okay? So, especially for people who want to get to financial independence, right? You got to be able to define what's enough for you, because without it, there's no end goal. You're never going to have enough, right? And that's a trap that the vast majority of the population already faces right now, right? They don't know what's enough. All they do is redefine their goals based on what their neighbors have. And then you're definitely just a part of the herd, okay? It doesn't mean anything. You don't need the newest Tesla or Mercedes every year. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, right? Like, you're in that trap. You don't even know why you're not getting anywhere in your financial life, right? So first, define what is enough for you, right? And I'll give you a piece of advice. Really think about, when were you happiest? Like, when I think about moments of my own happiness, I tend to think about, times when I had less responsibility, right? When I was a kid, my life was rather structured, based on what my parents wanted or what school wanted. But still, I didn't have a lot of adult responsibilities, didn't have to think about bills, I had very little money to play with, so how to spend money wasn't really big on my mind either, right? But I had good friends that were close by that I can hang out with. Like, for me, happiness was defined on personal relationships, really. So that didn't cost anything, right? So why should it later on, right? I had, obviously, my daily needs met. I wasn't going hungry. I had clothes to wear and all that. But we were scrappy, right? Like, I didn't have any money. All I did with my friends were, play Street Fighter 2. But I was really happy at that time, right? Maybe also because I was younger. But what does that matter, right? That lifestyle, when I think back on it, just wasn't very costly, okay? And that really affects how I define my rich enough, right? So, second part, what is rich enough for me personally, right? Because this question, is going to prompt a lot of very, very subjective answers, right? I can only answer for myself. It's going to be different for each one of you, but you should definitely think about it and honestly come up with an answer. And if you want, please comment below and tell me what it is that's your definition, right? So I'll tell you mine. Mine is basically whatever my minimum level of living would be. That's what usually people in the FIRE community call lean FIRE, right? So a very basic level of living with no frills, right? So whatever your annual expenditure on the most basic level, you times it by 25, that generally gets you a net worth you need to have to keep up that very basic level. And usually it's so basic that it's practically poverty level, right? So you get that number, and then for me, just multiply by 2. Okay, that gives me, to me, like a 100% margin of error. I think that's very good. That won't get you a luxurious life, by the way. I think for me, that would be like a lifestyle between $30,000 to $40,000 a year. I think that's just a regular life. You might be like, hey, how can you be happy, making only $30,000, $40,000 a year, right? Well, I'm talking about making $30,000, $40,000 a year purely passively, right? Without a job. What does that mean? Well, most of us spend about, 8 hours at work, maybe an hour or two commuting. So you're awake for 16 hours. You're at work or work-associated time for 10 hours. I mean, I'll take out another 2 hours on the 6-hour end for errands and eating meals. So your free time normally when you have a regular job is about 4 hours a day, okay? When you hit FIRE, you all of a sudden gain 10 hours back, okay? So you go from 4 hours of free time to 10 hours of free time. That's a 250% increase. Yeah, it's quite amazing, right? And no one has ever said that, like, hey, once you've hit that financial independence stage, you're not allowed to do anything, okay? You are. You can spend it on creative endeavors, like what I'm doing, right? That's how I can, feel motivated to chit-chat to you guys every day without the pressure of really thinking about the money part. I'm like, I don't really care, right? It'll be lunch money for me anyway, okay? So I can define rich enough in a different way than just the purely numerical, right? I just gave you a number, which is what most people are looking for. But to me, rich enough just means, like, hey, if you had all the time in the world, all of a sudden you're just not in a hurry, right? Like, you can go to stores when there's a sale. You can go during the middle of the day when most people are working. You just get so much flexibility, right? You have no idea what that feels like. When you drive somewhere, you can just go when there's no traffic, right? There's no commuter traffic because you have time. Personally, I find, like, what's more important than any kind of material goods that I can buy is just the level of stress that I don't have anymore. Like, it's amazing to me that these days, like, if I take the wrong turn somewhere, I don't care because I'm not in a hurry. It's not like I have to get back to the office. You see what I'm saying? So, what's rich enough? I think, it just depends, right? Like, for me, I enjoy making my own food. I'm learning how to cut my own hair, or at least maintain it. COVID gave me a great excuse to do that too. I just want to be self-sufficient, right? Obviously, there are tasks that I don't like. For instance, I don't really like mowing the lawn, right? I do it these days because it's exercise for me, right? But soon enough, I'm going to try to do landscaping or hire someone to do landscaping because I don't have that expertise. Okay, so but I have the choice, right? Like if I really wanted to learn how to do landscaping, I could do that too. Again, I look at it as exercise, right? It might not be a trade that I want to apply myself, deeply into, but I have the option to do so for purely like physical reasons, right? Like, it's good for the soul and it's good for the body too. Yeah. So approach your subjective answer with the same attitude, right? Like, you can't think about what your life would be like as if you're still spending that 8 to 10 hours at work or even thinking about work, right? Once you don't have that, I'm positive that your world will open up. And then you can start thinking about something of value or what you place as value that's not just about the money. All right? Thanks, guys. Good night.